4.1 Constructing an Argument. You and your team members have cultivated content, dissected claims, and collected evidence in relation to our question in your position. Now we will start to pull it all together into 3 concise claims supported by solid evidence and connected with sound reasoning, all working together to support a position. We will also acknowledge and refute a main claim in opposition to our position and support all the claims and counterclaims with relevant context. Once we build that content, we can use it to populate our outline and prepare to consider visual design and presentation. Curating claims. A claim is only as strong as the evidence supporting it, just like a position is only as strong as the associated claims. For the group presentation, the goal is to develop 3 strong claims and support each with strong source evidence and a clear explanation that clarifies the evidence and how it is connected to the claim. The connection between the claim and the position should also be stated explicitly. The context and evidence your team has collected should be available in the group grid and shared bib. To begin building your claims, review the evidence and start to associate it with related claims. A claim is a statement that is supported by a cluster of evidence. As such, the best way to develop a claim is to look at the information your team has gathered and see what it says. Patterns and categories should appear as evidence begins to overlap. This is a visual showing how the position statement leads to reasoning for support, claim statements, more reasoning for those claim statements, support, and evidence. While we read this image from the top down, ideally it is created from the bottom up. You may identify a few strong pieces of evidence that work together and synthesize them into a statement that functions as a claim, connecting the 3 pieces of evidence and links them to the position. Through your online research and collaboration, you should have encountered numerous claims already circulating in the conversations around your topic. Building from or on those main points by looking for evidence to support them is also an option. But instead of simply restating the claims of others, work to construct your own claim and develop reasoning to connect it to the evidence your group has gathered. You can always supplement your evidence with a specific search for key terms that have emerged throughout your reading. But start by thinking before letting the top search results determine your sources. Work together as a team to make sure you are creating claims that complete and complement each other instead of overlapping and contradicting. Each member can take the lead on a claim, but every member needs to contribute and is responsible for the final product, which shouldn't feel like distinct pieces shoved together. The claims should work together and build, and there should be consistency and continuity throughout the presentation. Constructing claims. A piece of information is just a piece of information, and it can be used in a number of ways. Often a piece of information can be used to support or refute the same position. Your ideas and the reasoning you provide to explain how pieces of information are connected to each other within the larger conversation and how the information functions within your argument is what gives the information meaning. This is a visual that shows the brackets starting from general information, which is you determine what is relevant, move into background context. You, of course, look at reasoning and connection and use evidence. And then that evidence goes into more reasoning and connecting into a claim statement. The red arrows demonstrate what you do with the information. The first 2 say relevant, and the second 2 say reasoning or connection. Your ideas and explanations not only define pieces of information as context or evidence, they also connect the pieces of context to each other and to the evidence, and they connect the pieces of evidence to each other and to the claim. Here you have a visual that hones in on the background context and evidence brackets in the previous image. Once the pieces of general information are entered into the brackets, your explanations and ideas will tell your audience why and how they function as context. Your ideas also connect pieces in one column together, the yellow. Then your ideas explain why information works as evidence, the red reasoning, and connect the pieces of evidence together, the yellow. The connection you establish between the pieces of evidence defines the claim, which you explain with reasoning. Finally, the claims are connected in their support for the position. For example, we know that the budgeted expenditures for USF in 2018 to 2019 totaled $1,837,037,219. Without context, that information is only information. It informs us but doesn't serve as evidence in support of a claim or a position. With more context, that information could serve as evidence and could be tied to a claim. What if we also knew that the 2018-19 budget was cut by 30%? And what if we located information that stated that some of the cut funds would have been used to fund a project that would have brought in significant grant funding? Taken together, we can make the claim that the prior cut actually cost the state money, and we could use the budget numbers from 2018 to 19 and prior years to show the differences in funding. We could then supplement the evidence with other source material that showed what was cut and the impact on the state, all of which would work in conjunction to support our claim and the overall position that funding should not be decreased. Or perhaps we knew that the budget of all the other state universities was considerably less per student than USF. Perhaps we also had a source that explained that the budget had actually been doubled every year for the past 3 years, and that USF administrators said they would spend a significant amount of the current funding on a lazy river in the shape of a bowl and in redesigning the logo again. We could make the claim that state funding should be decreased because it is unnecessary and disproportionate, and we could use the same budget numbers as evidence to support a different claim and the contrary position. One takeaway is that information is nothing until it is connected to other information within the context of a conversation. Then, for the information to serve as evidence, a reason needs to explain how it functions, along with other evidence, to support a claim. The claim also needs to be connected to other claims and to a position. The source material serves as the bricks, but you have to decide how to connect them and what to build. Another takeaway is that the goal is not to simply find 3 quotes from 3 sources that show 3 existing arguments in support of your position. That isn't the wrong way to do it, but it isn't the strong way to do it either. Doing so is how you end up with a paper or presentation that is thin and full of fluff. As the questions you encounter become more complex, that simplistic approach will not be enough to fulfill the expectations of upper-level courses or graduate work or work in your professional and personal lives. You aren't required to go gather new data in the form of a survey or to create original images, but those are the subsequent steps in advancing your argument. For now, the goal is to gather information and evidence you and your team can synthesize into original claims. You will probably locate and expand some existing claims on the topic and find strong evidence to connect to the claim with clear reasoning. In this way, the process of research is more of an iterative and circular practice than a set path we can follow in a straight line. Integrating claims. The basic way to support a claim is to offer a few pieces of evidence that directly support the statement of the claim. The evidence can present different perspectives or approaches to diversify the support. If we consider the question of whether or not an electric vehicle is a good option, and if we want to support the position that it is, we should state the claim and that is a good option because it saves money and present 3 different sources, all of which support the claim that EVs save money. Position: yes, an EV is a good option. Claim: an EV is a good option because it saves money. Evidence from that EVs save money from source 1, evidence that EVs save money from source 2, and evidence that EVs save money from source 3. Because there is one claim, the position statement can state the claim. EVs are a good option because they save money. The 3 pieces of evidence can vary by type of source or rhetorical appeal or content, such as the way they save money, purchase gas, maintenance. An approach like this is a great place to start, and extending the structure is built on this foundation. Offering 3 varied claims to support the position can strengthen the position. Our prior example was one claim with 3 pieces of evidence that support the claim, which is that EVs are good because they save money. More than one claim can be used to support a singular position statement. For instance, the position that an EV is a good option, but instead of offering 3 pieces of evidence to support the same claim, these different claims could be offered to support the position. Position: yes, an EV is a good option. Claim: an EV is a good option because it decreases gas use. Indent: evidence that EVs decrease gas, which helps owner and environment. Claim: an EV is a good option because it decreases pollution. Indent: evidence that EVs decrease pollution and the impact. Claim: an EV is a good option because they are built with renewable resources. Indent: evidence that EVs are built with renewable resources and the impact. Although the three claims are connected to the position and to each other, they offer variety. By adding multiple claims, each supported with evidence, the case supporting your overall position appeals to more perspectives, which can be more convincing for a person who agrees with all three perspectives and can expand your appeal to a broad audience of people who agree with any one of the three claims. Three claims are connected to the position. They are also connected to each other. The position statement can be expanded to include the overall connection between the claims. An EV is a good option because they are environmentally responsible. Connecting the claims can make the overall argument clear and concise, but adding diversity across the claims strengthens the overall argument in support of the position. Consider the following example. Position, yes, an EV is a good option. Claim, an EV is a good option because it saves money. Indent, evidence that EVs save money on purchase. Claim, an EV is a good option because it's environmentally responsible. Indent, evidence that EVs decrease gas use. Claim, an EV is a good option because there are great options. Evidence of the makes and models. We saw the first two claims in our prior example, so we know that they can function independently, albeit in a limited capacity. In effect, to expand this example, we connected three individual claims together. Our position statement is still that an EV is a good option, but the statement can be qualified by three independent claims. An EV is a good option because they save money, they are environmentally friendly, and they are cool. Expanding the support is necessary to answer a more complex question and appeal to a broader audience. And when the paper or presentation is well organized and concise, all that content can be fit in a short assignment instead of filling it with wordiness and fluff or unnecessary content. Further, longer assignments require expanded approaches that include layers of evidence supporting multiple claims. When you have space to support your conclusion, you can extend and refine your approach to include three pieces of distinct and diverse evidence for each claim. Position, yes, an EV is a good option. Claim, an EV is a good option because it saves money. Evidence that EVs save money on purchase price with tax exemption. Evidence that EVs save money on gas. Evidence that EVs save money on maintenance. Claim, an EV is a good option because it is environmentally responsible. Evidence that EVs decrease gas use. Evidence that EVs decrease pollution. Evidence that EVs use renewable parts. Claim, an EV is a good option because there are great options. Evidence of the various makes and models that are comparable to gas. Evidence of options that are better than most gas models and faster. Evidence of popularity and owner satisfaction. The 9 sources provide evidence to support 3 claims, each of which independently supports the positions. While it would be hard to fit the 9 points of evidence in only 3 paragraphs, each point could feed a paragraph, and 9 paragraphs is approximately 3 pages. In a presentation, providing a quote or statistic to support each point of evidence would be a great way to fill one slide, making these 9 points 9 slides. Obviously, we can no longer fit all 9 points in our position statement, but we can list the 3 claims, which will be built out in those sections. Clarifying the claims within the position because it saves money, is environmentally responsible, and has great options, lets your audience know that you will be offering multiple claims. The position statement even outlines the claims to make the overall structure transparent and clear, which helps your audience understand your argument and is necessary if you hope to convince the audience. Position. An EV is a good option because it saves money, is environmentally responsible, and has great options. Claim 1, EVs save money on gas, maintenance, and total cost. Claim 2, EVs are environmentally responsible because they decrease gas use, decrease pollution, and use renewable resources. Claim 3, EVs come in a variety of makes and models, have better options, and are faster, and are popular and have high owner satisfaction. We might have tried to shove too much in that last claim, so it should be clarified. And there could be times when the narrow approach is better for the audience or works to focus on a specific question. But in general, expanding the evidence and using multiple independent conclusions to support your main conclusion strengthens the argument and expands the scope of perspectives, which broadens the audience appeal. Adding different kinds of evidence as well as visual representations of the data or related images can also strengthen the overall argument in support of your position. To circle back, we began this example with the task of answering the question of whether or not an electric vehicle was a good option, which is a vague but practical research question. Immediately, we noted that our goal was to answer the question with a yes. The only way to research from that position backwards is to search for specific information and evidence to support a known answer. If the goal were to follow the available information and see which position it supports, we could not work backward. Ideally, that is the goal of research, to ask a question and look at the available information to see what answer it supports. Even when we know the positions we need to support, we can still come to the work with the eyes and mind of a researcher by starting with the information, moving through the process, and letting the strong sources lead. Countering claims. While creating solid connections and providing clear evidence to support your argument is a basic requirement of this assignment, perhaps the most important rhetorical move is to acknowledge and refute a main point of opposition. While gathering information for your argument, you will encounter counter-arguments that refute your claims and strong pieces of evidence in support of other positions. Part of making the case for your position is to recognize not only that there is evidence opposed to your position, but also that there is evidence in support of other positions. If there is a main position opposed to your position, acknowledge it and state the main points to clarify that you understand the opposition and can summarize it without overstatement, understatement, or misrepresentation. Stating the position prepares you to deconstruct and counter the claims. To do so, think of ways to add new information that expands the information offered by the opposition, or find a fault or weakness in the argument. Reviewing some main logical fallacies is one way to identify a weakness in a claim or in the connections between claims and evidence and positions. Avoid creating your own fallacy by offering a straw man opposition that is easy to refute instead of addressing a real opposition. Some arguments are solid, so instead of looking for a weakness, you can always add more context or other ideas to the point. For instance, perhaps a main argument against the position that electric vehicles are a good option is that when people feel better about driving them because they know all the good reasons to own one, they actually end up driving a lot more, and more mileage eliminates most of the benefits of owning an electric vehicle. We can acknowledge that point and think of ways to counter the argument with more context or information. Finding sources to support our ideas is great, but instead of searching for counterclaims, come up with your own ideas first. Then you can go look for sources to support those ideas. The response can be simple, like suggesting that electric vehicle manufacturers should add that information into their owner manual with suggestions for how to limit car use in general through ride sharing or pre-planning. Perhaps you could even find evidence that supports that idea, which wouldn't need to be limited to sources about electric vehicle owners. Any credible source that supports the claims that behavior is modified by information could be used to support your suggestion, as long as you explained it with reasoning that connected that information to your intention. Pausing to think through and about the information is the most important thing you can learn from this discussion. We are all tempted to look for answers and ask for input immediately. But before you think about where to look or whom to ask, give yourself some time to sit and think so that you know what to look for or ask. You might even find that you come up with cool, creative ideas. And if you don't, you will still be better for thinking through bad ideas and eliminating them. Including time to think while you are researching or reading for class is an important part of learning and research. Whether you are taking a walk, cleaning your house, driving with the radio off, or just hanging out, give your ideas a chance to roll around and make connections in your mind. Applying structured methods to your work is necessary, but the reasoning and explanations that connect your evidence to claims and your claims to the position cannot be found anywhere and need to be created through your considerations. Once you recognize a connection across pieces of evidence that you can state as a claim or connect to a claim, you also want to think through how you would deconstruct and refute it if you were supporting an opposing position. Without your ideas and critical thinking, all you will have is a bunch of source material without any structure. Structuring an argument. Structure is an important part of organizing any assignment, but when you work as a group, as you are probably aware by now, structure is a requirement. Because each team member will develop individual claims and find different evidence, following a format will allow the team to compile the claims and determine the best claims and evidence in the best order by comparing the content. Creating an outline in Google Docs and make sure that all the team members have access to it. The outline is important for many reasons, one of which is that all team members need to understand all the content. When you are collaborating, it can be easy to ignore the parts that aren't directly yours. Make sure that you keep in touch with other team members at all times. Schedule Teams meetings to discuss your findings and to keep up with the other members' work. Working separately and then pacing the work together is not collaboration. Each team member must make sure that the other members understand the contributed content. Doing so is a great test for the clarity of the content, because if your claim isn't clear to your team members, it isn't ready to submit to your classmates, your instructor, or your intended audience. The team members who serve as your initial audience can also ask questions to help improve the content in preparation for wide distribution. For this assignment, each team member will develop a claim and determine the best supporting evidence. In one paragraph, you will state the claim and explain the evidence. You will also include the same content in a bulleted format. Finally, you will share a potential point in opposition to your team's position or in support of the opposition and discuss options for deconstruction and refutation. Let's take a look at 3 parts of the assignment. In one paragraph, state your claim, show evidence and explain it and its connection to the claim, and connect the claim to the overall position. Be sure to format any sources you cite in accordance with the determined style. Include at least 2 pieces of evidence to support the claim. List the same information in bullets as you might for a presentation. Include a claim, evidence, and connection. State a claim that counters your claim or a strong claim in support of another position, and discuss how it could be deconstructed and refuted. Using the evidence you and your peers collected, identify a few pieces of information that serve as evidence in support of a claim. The claim could be a well-known claim offered by many voices in support of your position, or it could be a claim you created by synthesizing evidence. Make sure you and your team members aren't using the same claims or the same evidence across multiple claims. Communication as part of online collaboration is critical. Whether you use evidence from sources you found on the shared grid or bib, or from articles you submitted to the team, or some of each, locate the articles from which the evidence was pulled and read those articles closely. Now that you plan to use the content, develop a solid understanding of what the author is arguing by reading the text closely and critically, so that you can integrate your understanding and prioritize relevant content to cite. The paragraph you will write is essentially an expanded annotation, so make sure you and your team members develop a shared format. In order to complete this assignment, the required information must have been noticed and noted while reading the text. Thinking through an annotation template is a helpful step in the process of preparing to read and annotate the text, and can help you avoid wasting time reading for the wrong things, which will result in rereading the same text or not being able to find your way back to text you've read, or specific sections within those texts. When reading longer text, writing a summary at the end of each chapter or major section will help build your overall annotation. Annotations will also be included in the annotated bibliographies for your presentation packet and your personal packet. The goal is to construct an annotation that provides a summary of the work so that you can find and revisit it in the future. If another assignment requires you to construct a literature review or an extended summary, your template should be expanded in accordance with that intention. More substantial annotations that include specific information, such as direct quotations or paraphrased details, and analysis can provide more than a summary overview and can serve as content for the text you are constructing. Annotating a text reminds you to look for specific information while you read and allows you to pull out all the most important points you need. Writing an annotation based on the information you note while reading also requires you to think about a text critically and develop a richer understanding of what the text says and means. One way to structure an annotation is to create sentences that designate spaces for content and include major requirements such as signal phrase and citation. We know that our assigned paragraph needs to include a claim, evidence, explanation, and connection. So we want to build our annotation around those aspects of the assignment. We also know that including source material requires a signal phrase and attribution. Here's an example. Claim, one reason to support or oppose and decrease in funding for USF is because an increase will or will not, or whatever you are claiming. State your claim as clearly as you can and include as much information as needed. Here, probably just a sentence or two to clarify the claim and transition to the evidence. Evidence. In article title, author full name, verb, argues, demonstrates, finds, reports, claims, asserts that, state evidence, ideally quote thesis or claim from article with an in-text citation. Add page number or paragraph or header in accordance with the format your team is using. The first time you introduce a source, you generally offer a signal phrase. Your paper and presentation will include signal phrases, but because this annotation is focused on compressing key content and using more than one source in a paragraph, you might limit your introduction of the source. For the assignment, state at least 2 pieces of evidence and include a few sentences explaining each individually and how they relate to the claim collectively. Adding a little context or localizing the evidence in connection with the claim is a great way to integrate the source material. Connection: author's last name, findings, support, refute, expand, the claim that, add your content, which supports, refutes, expands, complicates, bolsters, counters the position that, add your content. To integrate the source into your writing, connect the evidence to your claim, connect the claim to the position, and explain anything about the connection that your readers need to know to understand. The connection explains not only how the evidence supports the claim, but also why the evidence supports the claim. Strong source material and clear claims are very important, but connections make strong arguments. What if you offer the position that time spent playing video games should be limited for teens? Then you supported the position with the claim that teens who spend more time playing video games are at a higher risk for depression and less likely to graduate. The position and claim are clear and connected. Perhaps you then offered evidence in the form of a quote from a leading researcher on the topic that stated 47% of teens play video games. While this may be true and may be context on topic, the connection needs to be clarified if it is to be used as evidence in support of a claim. Attempting to write the reason for the connection between the evidence and the claim would probably reveal that there isn't a strong connection between this source as evidence to support the claim, but it might also make it clear that the source material is a useful piece of context that can be included either within the paragraphs where the evidence is being connected to the claim, but as context for the evidence, not as the evidence, or in the background where context informs the reader about the broad topic. An example of evidence that does support the claim would be a quote in which the same leading scholar states that teens who play more than 10 hours of video games a week are 20% less likely to graduate high school on time, and more than 10% less likely to graduate at all. Even though the connection seems clear, it should still be stated in order to integrate the source material and clarify the connection as you want it to be understood. The risk of finding source material that is not connected to the claim is a result of developing a claim and then looking for sources to support it, instead of starting with the search for the source material and then building claims from the source material. While starting with the sources is the best option, even when you start with the literature and construct claims from it, there will still be instances when it is necessary to seek out sources that support the claim. When searching for source materials to support a claim, it can be easy to find an article or quote that is on the same subject and just drop that quote in even if that connection to the claim isn't so strong or present. Stating the connection in writing will help clarify for you and your reader the reasoning for the connection and why you are using that source. Sometimes we don't state the connection explicitly because we think the connection is evident, but even if it is obvious, explain the connection. The reasoning you offer and the way you explain it are vital elements in the argument you are making. Sometimes we don't clarify the connection because we are just happy to find a sentence we can drop in that is at least on the same subject, and we don't think about the connection beyond that link. Source material you don't connect may or may not actually be connected, but your reader will never know what connection you are offering because it isn't stated. In other cases, the connection is not stated because it is not there or it is not strong. And the best way to figure that out is by trying to explain the connection in writing. Identifying the connection allows you to evaluate the strength of the connection, and the strength of the connection determines the strength of the evidence, which impacts the strength of the claim and its support for the position. For instance, if you are supporting the position that the state of Florida should decrease funding for USF, and you are supporting the position with the claim that an individual employee at USF misused or miscategorized funding for a USF building project years ago, you would want to clarify the connection, which may include stating whether the connection you see is causal or corollary. One of the moves most likely to weaken an argument is overstatement, specifically overstating the connection between the claim and the evidence. With the misuse of funds example, the claim that one prior misuse of funds suggests a trend or predicts future behavior is a very weak connection. A strong connection is a connection that accurately explains what the evidence says and how it is related to the claim. The statement that one employee's prior misuse suggests the possibility that employees in large organizations can break rules that take time to catch and correct is an appropriate explanation of a fair and defensible takeaway from that evidence, which would make the connection clear. The clarity of that connection, however, reveals that the strength of that evidence to support the overall argument is thin at best. The question of sustaining or decreasing state funding for USF is far larger than a single example or exception that has to be overstated to support a position. Worth recognizing and repeating is the difference between the strength of a claim and the strength of the evidence and the strength of the connection. For a claim and an overall argument to be strong, all those connections need to be strong. If there's a strong connection between the evidence and the claim, but the connection between the claim and the position is weak, that weak link breaks the chain. A weak link in the structure of an argument is what allows opponents to deconstruct and dismiss the argument. Understanding this structure not only allows you to craft a strong argument, it also allows you to deconstruct weak arguments offered in opposition of your position. Formats like the claim, evidence, connection, sample sentences structure offered above are formal and assume that each paragraph will have one source and evidence in support of the claim, and that there will be 2 or 3 similar paragraphs stating the evidence for each claim, which is a great approach for this paper because the formal signal phrasing is needed. For our assignment, we will keep that formal approach for a paper in mind, but our goal is to fit more than one piece of evidence in an annotation paragraph that will feed our presentation. A submission of this assignment might look more like this sample paragraph. The state of Florida should not decrease funding to USF because decreasing state funding for USF again could cost the state even more in lost federal funds and the work it would support. In The Cost of Cuts, USF President Stephen Curl explains that the university is still feeling the impact of the 2018 cuts to funding. The money that was removed from our budget was taken from the Office of Research and Development, which cost the state millions in federal grant money. After the 2018 budget cuts, the USF budget shows that $4 million of federal funding were lost the next year due to a lack of internal supporting funds to ground the grant proposal. In addition to causing USF to lose federal funding, Grawl also points out that the Office of Research and Development funding that was cut was supporting the continued efforts of researchers working on vaccines and on development efforts aimed at expanding the nursing program so that we could train more healthcare workers. Decreasing funding for USF again could result in the loss of even more funding in research and cause the state of Florida to miss out on the positive impact of all the research that would have resulted from the defunded research projects, including training more nurses. Can you identify the position, claim, evidence, explanation, and connection? The way we state the claim can be as simple as saying that decreasing will harm the state, or as complex as saying that decreases could cost the university matching funds that could support vital public health research. But any version of the claim should explicitly connect to the position that the state should not decrease funding for USF. In a paper, the sample annotation paragraph could be expanded into 2 paragraphs connected with transition, integrated with explanations, and connected to the claim and position. The evidence to support the claim could even be expanded to include more context, such as information on the research that was lost when the funding was cut, or context on the shortage of local nurses. In a presentation, that claim and evidence would be built out over a few slides with statistics, quotations, and citations. A visual could even be offered. We can see the position, claim, and evidence in this paragraph, and if we were reading this paragraph closely, we could extract the main points. Bullets. Position. No, the state should not decrease funding for USF. Claim. Decreasing state funding for USF again could cost the state even more in lost federal funds and the work it would support. Evidence. The money that was removed from our budget was taken from the Office of Research and Development, which cost the state millions in federal grant money that could have helped us support researchers working on public health and virus research. After the budget cuts that resulted in the defunding of many research projects, the USF budget shows that $4 million of federal funding were lost the next year due to a lack of internal supporting funds to ground the grant proposal. Curl also points out that the Office of Research and Development funding that was cut was supporting the continued efforts of researchers working on vaccines and on development efforts aimed at expanding the nursing program so that we could train more healthcare workers. Connection. The impact of prior cuts provides an example of the damage that results from cutting funds and the potential damage of future cuts. The evidence in your paragraph and bullets should be the same. To create the bullets in the paragraph, you can move from points to paragraph or from the paragraph to points, or you can cycle through both interchangeably. Work together to give each other feedback and to share evidence across claims. In addition to the simple fact that more readers can cover more ground, your peers probably noticed different elements in the text they read and annotated. So the evidence in support of your claims will be more diverse and will appeal to a broader audience as a result of working as a team. Also work to dissect your peers' claims and your own by looking for holes and weaknesses. How can we counter the claim in our sample, for instance? If the evidence is strong and cited, look at the connections to question the reasoning. When we do so, we can see that the claim is built on the assumption that new funding spent on research and development will produce the same result as it did in prior years, but that is an assumption without a guarantee. Perhaps the matching grants are no longer available. Perhaps the strong researchers who lost their jobs when the prior funding was pulled left for other universities. The claim is built on an assumption, which might be strong enough for our audience, but does leave the claim vulnerable to refutation. Another benefit of working as a team is that you can practice poking holes in each other's claims and connections, which will strengthen the overall argument and presentation. As you create connections, go ahead and think through how opponents would deconstruct and refute your argument. Use this deconstructive practice together when you discuss your presentation during your online conversations or Teams meetings. Also, think about how you would use visual sources to support and clarify your claim and evidence. Because your presentation will probably be built on narrated bullets, also think of how you could shift the paragraph into language that could be spoken in conjunction with bullets and images to explain the content. Practice this together, making sure that you use a shared document with easy access for all the team members. Finally, start thinking about your opposition. If your position is a yes, the state should decrease funding, the arguments of your opposition are claims that support no, either by countering yes claims or supporting no claims. If you are a proponent of the no position, your opposition promotes the position that the state should not decrease funding for USF. By now, you and your team members should have run into some of the major points and perspectives of proponents and of the opposite position, who are opponents of your position. Admittedly, this is a simplistic explanation based on the assumption that there are only two perspectives, but for our purposes, let's play it through. Remember that evidence is just information unless it is explained and situated within the structure of an argument. Both opponents and proponents of decreasing state funding for USF can point at the same piece of information, the budget for instance, and use that source to argue in support of their opposing positions. To support maintaining funding, opponents of decreasing funding could carry that funding should not be decreased because the current level can only cover required expenses. So investing in areas that would increase the return on investment, such as finding matching grants, buying in scale, planning in advance, improving optimization efforts, cannot be funded and ultimately cost the state and university millions over the years. Proponents of decreasing funding, who oppose maintaining funding, could point at the same budgetary shortfalls and interpret them by saying that the fact that the current budget is only being used to cover the required expenses suggests that the university has not optimized the use of funds or secured outside support from sources other than the state. Both positions could point to outside sources to bolster their claims, and both could counter or refute the opposing claims. In response to the arguments in support of maintaining funding, proponents of decreasing funds could explain that the expenses being covered by the budget are mostly state-required expenses that the university cannot ignore, but that the state could share or adjust. As evidence, proponents of decreasing funds could point out that the state does not give the university enough money to cover the cost of students who receive the Bright Futures Award. The university has to make up the difference, and this action increases tuition costs for students without bright futures. Opponents could then counter these specific claims, request evidence to support them, or move the conversation in a different direction by adding new information and explaining its connection as a counter. Considering this exchange allows us to see that information is just information until connected and contextualized within the claim. And it helps us to start thinking of how we will identify and refute an opposing claim as part of this assignment. Be sure to identify and refute a major claim and not a straw man in support of the opposing position, and acknowledge that it is a reasonable claim. Then either explain why, in spite of that claim, your position is stronger, or deconstruct that claim by finding fault in it or offering information to complicate or counter the claim. After everyone on your team offers a refutation for this assignment, you will work together with your team to determine how to select and include one oppositional claim to refute in your presentation. The oppositional claim you refute works as your fourth claim and can serve as a strong way to tie your argument together by connecting your three strong claims in support of your position with a final claim that refutes your opposition. Refuting a strong opposition also proves that you are engaged in a genuine debate instead of simply offering three strong claims in support of a position that isn't really even debatable. Breathing is important to stay alive. Here are my three strong claims. Look at me go! In addition to submitting this content in Canvas to fulfill the assignment, compile the individual submissions again in a shared doc to populate your team outline, which will be submitted as part of the presentation packet. Synchronous work times on shared documents for small tasks could also be an option, but use Teams to discuss important aspects of your presentation. The theories and practices of argumentation are not simple. Working with your peers to talk through context and claims that could potentially work for your position and which are strongest and why it is an important part of constructing a strong argument that everyone in your group understands and can present and defend. Assignment 4.1. After completing the reading, provide a considered response to each of the assignment questions and upload your answers to Canvas. Number 1. Using the same position, claim, and evidence offered in the sample paragraph and bulleted list within the 4.1 reading, rewrite the sample paragraph. Then, explain what you changed and why it made the paragraph more effective as support for the position. Number 2. In one paragraph, state your claim, show evidence, explain the evidence, connect it to the claim, and connect the claim to the overall position. Be sure to format any sources you cite in accordance with the determined style. Include at least 2 pieces of evidence to support the claim. Number 3. List the same information in bullets as you might for a presentation. Include the position, a claim, evidence, and a connection. Number 4. Refute the claim you have offered and discuss how the refutation could be deconstructed and countered.